Hello and welcome to the Small Business Briefing. I'm Brian Calley, the CEO of the Small Business Association of Michigan.
Good afternoon. Thanks for joining us today. I'm Sarah Miller, Vice President of Marketing and Strategic Communications. And as we do on Mondays, we like to welcome one of our newer members. So today we're welcoming the Shepherd of the Lakes Luther Church, located in Walled Lake. And of course, we're welcoming them on behalf of our sponsor, Consumers Credit Union. I'm going to make a little plug. As a kind of a Thanksgiving promotion, SBAM is offering 23% off upgraded or new memberships. So if you've been considering upgrading or joining, now is a great time. You can use the code THANKS23 on our website or email us at sbam@sbam.org for more details. So Brian, let's start out today's show with the latest unemployment and labor force participation rates.
Yeah, well, so we talked a little bit last week. The big news was inflation numbers, and I'll have some charts later on to show on that. But also released was the monthly unemployment labor force participation for the state. So we hear of the national numbers around the same time when we get state updates. And the state came in at 4.1%, which was 0.2 higher than the month before. But it does mark now 4 consecutive months of increases in our unemployment rate. So they're small or modest increases, but kind of inching up a little bit after many consecutive months of declines. Now, you've heard me say before that if there's good reasons and bad reasons that the unemployment rate goes up. In the last couple of months, I would say that it's generally been because of good reasons, and that is because of labor force participation increasing. So overall, about 23,000 more people got into the labor force last month, and that really accounts for the increase in the unemployment rate. And we've started to see that trend happening. And now there's plenty of debate, I'm sure, behind the drivers and why labor force participation has started to creep up, but we're getting further and further away from the time when the federal government was just kind of pumping additional dollars into the economy in a lot of different ways. Savings rates went to an all-time high, or at least a modern day high with respect to personal finances. There's just a lot of things happened that allowed people to be out of the workforce, on the margins at least, for a longer period of time. But that spigot from the federal government has gone to, certainly hasn't been shut off, but it's gone to like normal levels. And then also we see inflation increasing quite a bit, and credit card debt is rising. Loan delinquencies are starting to creep up, especially in unsecured debt. So these are the sorts of things that probably, again, on the margins, are just pushing a few more people back into the workforce as compared to before. So most of that increase, actually in this last month, all of that increase could be tracked right back to just an increase in the labor force participation for the previous month. So not a bad reason for that. One other thing I thought I'd mention was that we've had on this show a few times an economist from the U of M that does a lot of the forecasting for the state of Michigan, and his name is Gabe Ehrlich, and he does the forecasting for the state, and the U of M actually put out their Michigan forecast in terms of whether or not they expected a recession to happen in this next year, and they were actually gave us one of those economists for a long time that said, actually softening, slowing, yeah, but I really don't see a recession happening, when a lot of other economists were predicting it. Now, looking back over this last year, he turned out to be right. Over this past year, we have seen each quarter positive GDP, and there was a few quarters in the previous year, in 2022, where we saw some contraction, but this year he ended up being really pretty spot on, when a lot of economists weren't expecting that. So I've always paid a lot of attention to what Gabe says and the things that he in the forecast that he does, and so looking ahead, U of M's forecasts for Michigan are not for a recession. and it's really not difficult to see why, even though there are plenty of indicators of slowing and slowness in several areas, and net growth has been in areas where we have seen net growth has really been kind of canceled out by inflation. The there's just not enough people for there to be high unemployment, and then for consumer spending to fall substantially, and for housing prices to fall when there's so little stock out there. So really, the conditions are such that the normal economic indicators that we would look at to determine a recession are resilient for arguably bad reasons. Population stagnation being chief among them, but looking forward at the forecast for the next year, actually pretty moderate forecast, so not impressive growth, but also not contraction. So there's some other things that came out last week when the big news was inflation. Just wanted to touch on a few of them as we head into to the last couple months of the year.
All right, and now we do have a special guest joining us today. It's been kind of a big week for the SBAM Foundation, Brian. So I'm going to turn it back over to you to introduce our guest and fill our viewers in.
Yeah, very good. Well, our next guest will be no surprise, or will be no stranger to longtime watchers of this broadcast, but also those that are very active with SBAM, a former chair of the board of directors of SBAM, and lifelong small business owner that had sold the business a few years ago, and has now actually come on board as the full-time executive director, the first executive director of the SBAM Foundation. Now, that's SBAM Foundation is part of the Small Business Association of Michigan, but not the same organization. So let me say first, David Roy, thank you so much for coming on the briefing today again. I don't know how many times I should have looked it up. Probably been three, 4 times, I guess, that you've been on the briefing. But also, thank you for accepting the huge responsibility and awesome work that comes along with getting the SBAM Foundation off the ground. So welcome, and maybe start out with just what is the SBAM Foundation?
Well, thank you, Brian. It's a pleasure to be here, and it's just an absolute honor to be able to work and continue my work actually with the great folks here at SBAM. I've been working with SBAM. I think I'm in starting my 24th year. January will be my 24th year associated with SBAM, and couldn't be more pleased with the wonderful work that we've been doing here. So the SBAM Foundation is a newly found nonprofit foundation that is part of the SBAM family of companies. Our primary function here at the foundation is to support the mission of the Small Business Association of Michigan. And if we look at what our aspirational goals are, it really is to make entrepreneurial success available to everyone. And there are a number of different programs and projects and things that get done at the state and federal and even the local level in an effort to increase economic activity and lift people up in their daily lives socially and economically. And we believe that entrepreneurship is a great pathway for raising that level of economic success and socioeconomic success. So our function will be to support SBAM in its mission, and we'll be getting that underway. Literally, we started last week actually in our efforts to get going.
Yeah, that's awesome. And entrepreneurship is such a powerful force out in the marketplace, and we want to make sure that that's available to everybody. And the foundation really can zero in on ensuring that entrepreneurship is available across the board, that there isn't anybody that's left out from who wants to start a business to actually to start, grow, maintain, build the business that they dream about or that they already have. I wondered if you could maybe to some of the audience, this will be kind of breaking news. A couple of weeks ago, the SBAM Foundation was awarded a multi-year $3.4 million grant to be a small business hub. So this really will kind of take us into hyperdrive with the work that's happening at the foundation. So let's start with, what is a small business hub?
So the Small Business Hub grant, excuse me, is part of a grant program that comes through the MEDC in support of the Michigan Strategic Fund. And it's designed to provide access to education and meaningful content to help companies who have been disproportionately affected by COVID-19 and the pandemic, all the restrictions and the closures and all the things that went on during the pandemic. And there are still companies and organizations who are suffering from that. There are many companies. In fact, one of the group that we'll be working with most closely are established first and second stage businesses who are ready and able to make the move to the next level, whatever that next level might be for them, but they just need a little assistance in the form of education or access to data or understanding the process that needs to happen with looking for additional funding, that sort of thing. And that's where the SBAM will come in. So the loan, or not the loan, rather, the grant that comes to us from the MEDC will allow us to provide this educational content and support to all 10 MEDC regions throughout the state. We're going to be a state, we're going to take the same statewide approach that we take with SBAM and all of its programs, and we're going to take this process statewide. There are a number of finance groups that are going to be also working with grants of their own. They're more focused on either a local level or a particular subset of businesses. We're looking at all businesses, small businesses in Michigan that have been adversely affected by the pandemic.
Yeah, and I was really pleased to see how wide that definition was too. So it's not a matter of, I mean, you can show that by like sales went down or something like that, but also different groups that just across the board fared worse during the pandemic. Minority-owned businesses, women-owned businesses, veteran-owned businesses, and also geographic areas, census tracts where the overall economic health was hit pretty hard, and it really does cover many businesses across the state. And so we do expect pretty widespread participation and eligibility across the board. So I thought it might make sense to talk a little bit about timeline then. So we just got notified of the grant. And by the way, we do things in partnership with other organizations. SBAM loves to work with other organizations. I expect we'll have a network of organizations for implementation of this across the state. Maybe give us a sense for the timeline. What are we looking at in terms of the when things really kind of get kicked off, and then how long does the grant last for?
So we expect to kick off at our annual meeting coming up this June, and we'll have more information leading up to the annual meeting. And if you haven't thought of attending, or if you have attended and haven't put it on your calendar, get it on your calendar. It's coming up in June, and I want to say it's the 16th or 17th, 18th and 19th of, you'll have to fill me in on that, Brian, but I've got it on my calendar. I just have my calendar in front of me. We'll be getting information out in advance of that. And then we'll be rolling out this program with our strategic partners around the state. And we're in the process right now of solidifying those agreements and solidifying those relationships and codifying the content that we'll be able to bring to qualified businesses throughout the state, around the state. And we're going to be able to engage with businesses at very much a local and regional level. And we'll start to have that information. We're gonna roll it out at the annual meeting, and then we're going to continue that rollout all the way through the end of the grant, which currently is scheduled for December 31st of 2026. So from the time of rollout to the time that the initial grant ends will be just over 30 months, and we've got a lot of work in front of us, but it's work worth doing.
Excellent. Well, thanks again, David. Thanks for coming back on. Thanks for joining the team and playing such a proactive role. You know, since it came up as the purpose of the grant, the COVID-19, those disproportionately impacted by COVID-19, it's probably worth mentioning because I bet you that almost any long-term viewer of this program that knows that we started this broadcast when the pandemic was when we were in the depths of it, and there was this thing the government required. It was called the Response and Preparedness Plan, and so everybody who had employees had to have one of these, and so we had a template, and that template, as people may or may not know, was actually based off your COVID-19 response and preparedness plan for your small business that you were running in Portage, Michigan at the time, and that ended up being one of the most downloaded and used templates that we have ever had at SBAM. So I thought it was worth pointing out that many of the people that are watching this, if you had a response and preparedness plan that came from SBAM's template, David Roy was actually the author of kind of the base information that was used for that template. Thanks for your years of service, David.
Thank you, Brian.
All right, well, yes, welcome, David. And clarification, SBAM's annual meeting is June 13th, 2024. So mark your calendars now. All right, Brian, I think we have a Data Monday report next.
All right, I'm going to share some, and this one's actually fairly abbreviated because we are, in the second half of the month. There's less new information coming out, but let's start with the CPI. Just looking at it on a graph here, and on this graph, you will see that inflation, the headline inflation at 3.2%, going back to last year. And this is the sort of thing that really does give our Federal Reserve Board and the chair of the board some confidence that while it's taken a lot longer than what they were expecting or hoping, inflation really has settled down quite a bit.
Hey, Brian, I don't mean to interrupt you, but you have a give subtitles a try option that I'm seeing. So I'm not sure everyone is able to see your graph right now. I don't know.
The only option is to turn it on, so I guess that's what I will do.
Okay. Oh,
Okay.
we're gonna see that. Okay.
Very good. Well, we have here the chart that gives the month by month, but also just looking at there's two different measures of inflation, and this has both on it, but you can see both kind of follow similar trend lines, and the CPI is now at 3.2%. That is showing probably lower, or definitely is lower than core inflation because of gas prices mainly. So looking at core inflation, and this is overlaid, this graph we're looking at now, core inflation is overlaid with the Federal Reserve target rate, or the way that the Federal Reserve has increased interest rates. So you see that in the orange line. You see how that shot up really fast, and it's not uniquely fast, as you can see that there have been a few times when lines look almost as steep as this one, but a very substantial increase from what was historically significant about this is from a very, very low rate. The Federal Reserve for a period of time had interest rates near zero, and they increased them all the way up to 5.5%. As you can see, it took a while for core inflation, and that's what this chart shows. So not CPI, but they take out food and energy, which are prices that move up and down quickly based on things that are commodity based as opposed to the core inflation, and you can see that is trending down. So the market definitely believes that the Federal Reserve is likely done increasing interest rates, and a recession by any kind of traditional definition is much less likely in the future. But you can see here that this is the reason why there's enough consistent downward trend in core inflation that they know that the monetary policies are working. So now the NFIB, the National Federation of Independent Businesses, that does a survey monthly, and I usually like to show a few slides from that survey. In this case, small businesses that say now is a good time to expand. You see that is very low right now, and really not much sign of that changing anytime soon. And it doesn't necessarily mean because the economic outlook is bad, but just finding people, uncertainty. There's just not as much appetite as there was going back just a few years in terms of small businesses expanding. And then looking at expected credit conditions, you'll see that those are lower. And I apologize, I'd like to see that with part of the legend for the graph is off. But if you were to look at that place where it really trenched down, that was at 2008, 2009 period when you really couldn't get financing. But credit conditions, for many small businesses couldn't get financing. But credit conditions really are a lot worse than they were in the past or not too long ago. And then those that are expecting higher prices, this had come down and now it's kind of trending back up a little bit, inching back up a little bit. So small businesses expected that are expecting, or they're experiencing higher prices, and they're expecting to raise their prices in the future. At least that's trending in that direction. The last slide that I have today is looking at the U.S. debt and deficit as a percentage of the gross domestic product. So how much debt compared to the size of our economy do we have? We covered on this briefing that the U.S. had experienced a downgrade in our credit rating, so AAA rated countries. And I thought this chart really demonstrates why. So at the top of the chart, you'll see Australia, Canada, Denmark, Germany, Luxembourg, all those countries. Each of them are AAA rated bond countries. The U.S. lost its AAA rated bond status. So this chart, I think, really helps to illustrate why the U.S. was becoming an outlier on this chart when you compare our debt level as a proportion of GDP to other AAA rated countries. So in this first column to the left, you see the budget deficit. So that's the rate at which you're going into debt in any given year, the deficit. It's not your total debt, but the deficit. It would be the current year expenses minus the current year revenue. That's the deficit. And so you'll see that the U.S. was much higher, well, much lower because it's a negative number, but much different than the rest of these AAA rated countries. And then the gross debt, so the total amount of debt, not the amount that you take on in a given year, but the entire debt of the country divided by the GDP. And you'll see that the U.S. fares much worse than the rest of the countries as well. Really impressed with Norway. And looking at Norway's numbers, pretty impressive. It's worth looking into how they've pulled that off. So Data Monday this week really does, it's just, I would say it's the sort of thing that is just a bit tempered in that there's not big warning signs that there's big problems that are on the horizon, but also small business owners appear to be feeling what, according to those surveys, what I heard out of the forecasts from the U of M here in Michigan, which was not really expecting a recession, but also not expecting anything particularly impressive either. So kind of a steady as she goes type of a scenario.
All right. Well, we won't be back on Thursday. Thursday is Thanksgiving. So, of course, we want to wish everyone a wonderful Thanksgiving. And here's a reminder that Saturday is Small Business Saturday. And so while we advocate for supporting small businesses and patronizing them all year round, this Saturday is a great day to show your support for your local small businesses. So when you're considering shopping for the upcoming holiday season, we hope you'll consider what a small business can offer. I know I have a few favorites. I've already started my shopping, but I know I'll be out this weekend, and I'm sure Brian and the rest of the SBAM team will too. If you want to share your favorites on social media, you can use the hashtag #ShopSmall. But we just really encourage you to get out there and show these businesses some love and support. I'll drop a link. The Free Press actually did a nice article on a few small businesses in the greater Detroit area. So I'll share that. We have a couple members mentioned. But with that, I'd say happy Thanksgiving and happy Small Business Saturday.
Happy Thanksgiving, everybody. See you next week.